Yeah, I have to agree. There's so much has changed in the last 12 months, right? You think about where we were at the beginning of 2025, look where we are at the beginning of 2026. Um, I think the age of AI is the rate that we're experiencing change is absolutely phenomenal.
67% of technology is now run by the business rather than technology because it's all unapproved. So I think part of what the Alice story is and part of the Camwood story, I think to a degree, is trying to simplify the complex, because the things have become very complicated, have been built up from legacy systems to new systems to different ways of working.
It's not too red, but it's got a tinge of orangey in there.
Do you know what is red though?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people don't really understand the vulnerability posture of their estate, therefore their dashboard is showing red.
I think, Will, how often do we get spoken to about those kind of things, right? I mean, every other day I've got somebody coming to me.
And it's still very true today that the biggest cyber risk to a business are its internal people.
Yep.
Because of lack of education.
Of course, yeah.
And yet we've built this massive cyber industry that was one of the fastest growing in tech history until AI became this bigger thing.
Yeah.
So does that mean for the next 10, 15 years, we're going to be talking governance, education, data management?
Yeah.
But actually what we're trying to do is flip that completely on its head.
Yeah.
So rather than justifying what we think or know the outcome will be in 2 or 3 months' time, that customer gets that there and then.
Upfront.
And that's hugely important, I think, for building trust with the customers, because we can say, for example, we've identified 1,000 applications, but you only need 200 to move forward with it.
Yeah.
So actually it takes legacy debt out. To your point, you don't migrate what you don't need. And I think this phrase time to value is something that customers will start to hear more about, where you start using real data sets and data points to build that business case.
Yeah, no, that's true. I can use AI to create a better job for myself. So I think that for me is personally. What about yourself, Abby? You keep asking me all the questions.
Oh, because you're not asking me anybody questions.
It's keep talking all the time. That's why.
I think you see some really, really positive and strong use cases in healthcare.
Yep.
Not specifically around kind of replacing job roles with AI, but early diagnosis based on patterns and the great use of data, which means that consultants that may typically spend 80% of their time looking at diagnosis can now spend 20% of their time on diagnosis because AI is doing the 80%. So that over a long period of time should reduce wait times for various critical diseases.
Yeah. Well, good job we're recording this.
That's right. Exactly.
But no, I think there's a lot of interesting conversations we can have out there. And I don't think necessarily, the intercomparability thing that you were talking about or whatever it is, right? Competition is what you were talking about. You don't need to see everybody as competition. Okay, so before we actually do put a cork in the AI,
yes,
do you think Skynet's going to happen?
Yes.
Excellent.
I think we don't know what we don't know at the moment.
Yeah, I agree.
I
agree. I think I think we're doing all we can to just put controls and things like that. But I mean, that's a conversation for when this is completely finished. I think.
I do believe that's one for Wetherspoons. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the inaugural Vintech. Myself, Andrew Carr.
And Sanjay Taylor.
Are delighted to welcome to you over the next few episodes, and we hope that you enjoy having a bit of fun with us and learning a little bit about wine and hopefully a bit more about technology.
So welcome, guys. So today we have the first bottle of wine that we're going to be sampling. Andrew's going to be telling you a little bit about this wine.
So this is a Waitrose Barolo, also known as the King of Wines, which is interesting for Sanjay and I because we see ourselves as the kings of Camwood in our business world. So it's quite a complex red wine, very deep, very earthy, smoked, oak smoked for 18 months. But we'll open it, I think, and then we'll see what kind of flavors, what kind of taste, what kind of things we think about the complexity of this wine to link back to technology. Sanjay, would you like to
That's a good idea. Thank you very much.
So this is the grand opening ceremony for the first episode of Vintech.
Correct. That's it. And I don't think we could have picked a better wine, to be fair.
Well,
I think
King of Wines.
Absolutely. And if we're going to start off, we're going to start off well.
But if it goes well, and we hope we get lots of subscribers to this, if we maybe do this monthly, the more we get, then I think the better the bottle of wine that we can introduce.
Correct.
Or even maybe the more obscure bottle of wine that people may not have heard of and isn't quite as mainstream.
Absolutely. And we're always looking for good recommendations.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, with it being January, it's been quite cold recently. So a nice warming red with very bold and big character, we thought would be a really great place for us to start on Vintech and this wine adventure that we're going on.
I agree. I mean, I'm looking forward to what this is going to taste like, because I just want to see where the conversation takes us.
Well, it goes. Treat it as almost like we're in a Wetherspoons having a few drinks together, but actually we're being sophisticated this time.
We are indeed.
And we're not ordering from the table, because I haven't got an app for this yet.
Which is also correct, but we do have a table, so
We
it's
do have a
brilliant.
table and we do have some lovely chairs. So just be careful with that one, because it's obviously the first one. Don't want to be
don't worry.
staining the chairs
Don't worry,
in
don't worry.
episode 1, do we?
Well, I'll take my time. Don't worry.
So as I said, what we're going to try and do is link some of the themes of this wine in particular.
Lovely. Have a smell of
To
that.
also, I guess. That's lovely.
Yeah.
To some of the trends that we see in technology. So again, it's meant to be a bit of humorous, a bit more humanized than some of the podcasts that are potentially AI generated these days, right? 'Cause
Correct,
they don't really have much personality about them, because it seems very robotic and very monosyllabic is the word I was looking for. I.e. one tone, by the way. That's
Very
what that
good
means.
choice of words there, Andrew.
So I think, why don't we start there? So, personalizing technology, I think, is really important these days, because the advent of AI tools, the advent of agentic AI,
Yeah.
the advent of small language models as well as large language models now, really makes us think that we've just uncorked what was one of the biggest talking points of the last 12 months in technology.
Yeah, I have to agree. There's so much has changed in the last 12 months, right? You think about where we were at the beginning of 2025. Look where we are at the beginning of 2026. I think the age of AI is the rate that we're experiencing change is absolutely phenomenal. But before we go into all of that, I think we should probably do what we're best at, right, Andrew?
I think we probably should do it.
Yeah.
Like talking technology across.
Well, of course it is. Our nose for wines isn't too bad either.
Too bad.
So I suppose we give it a little smell first. Maybe don't chink too early.
Oh, that's quite complex.
That's got a lot of flavors in that.
I think that's got wild berries.
Yeah, I can smell the oak.
I think it's almost like a tobacco-y taste because it's been oak smoked for 18 months.
Yes.
I
think something like this would be fantastic over an open fire.
I think red meats
with
cheese.
Yeah, cheese. Well, I would almost go with a nice cigar as well.
Yes, we could. Cigar tech maybe coming down the line.
So that's what could be the future of Volvo. It's got a lovely color. If you
that is beautiful, isn't it?
It's not too red, but it's got a tinge of orangey in there.
Do you know what is red though?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people don't really understand the vulnerability posture of their estate. Therefore, their dashboard is showing red.
I think how often do we get spoken to about those kind of things, right? I mean, every other day I've got somebody coming to me. We've got this vulnerability, that vulnerability. They're all high. They're all critical. What do we do about it, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah, not a bad pass. I mean,
well, it's just we're new to this. We are Vintech virgins, so to speak. Well, so
I think on that note, I think you've probably got a very good topic to go with, or to start it off with, actually. But I think we definitely need to sample this first, right?
I do believe we should say cheers.
Cheers.
Oh, that tastes as good as an application rationalization. That does.
Well, it's all those complex layers, right?
Beautiful.
That is very good. That is very, very good.
So what? So we've got a nice bold, deep, earthy red, which it doesn't come cheap, but you pay for quality. As we said at the start, it's known as the king of wines.
Yep.
So in the last 12 months, what's the most complex thing that you've had to deal with?
Wow. Well, I think there's been a lot of stuff, right? I think, as I said, the world's changing so much. And I think people are trying to keep up with things. Like, everybody comes up, I know we talk to everybody, right? It's like, okay, we've got this project that we're doing. We're trying to migrate from, this version of Windows onto this version of Windows. Big thing's been people trying to move from one VDI to another, right? They do all the basic stuff. They get that right. They get the infrastructure built up. And then all of a sudden they're like, right, pilot's done.
Yep.
And then what?
Yep.
people, the CIOs and CTOs are asking, well, what's next, guys? You've just spent all this money on a POC. What's coming out of it?
Yeah.
And often the problem is, well, we don't know what to do next, right? Because we're going to have to now do a £100,000 project to go and find out who's using what, potentially look at repackaging things, because we just don't understand, go and do some discovery on what applications we've got out there. So I think the biggest things that we've seen this year is people coming to us saying, look, we don't know what we've got in our estate, guys.
Yeah.
We don't know what the vulnerability posture is. We want to move to all this new modern technology, but we don't want to be taking the rubbish with us.
Yes.
So
what happens with that then? Because that's like saying, I'm going to buy a £3 bottle of wine from some dodgy supermarket and then compare it to Barolo, right? So where do you start with it?
Yeah, so I think, there's always a traditional method, right? You can always go in and some people like the personal touch where you go out there, speak to the end users, try and identify this, go to almost any PC, every PC that you've got, get a list and stuff. But as I said before, this is so time consuming. We can't, people's organizations just can't afford that kind of stuff anymore, right? As you know. The approach we've taken is to use automation. We've built a SaaS application, as you know, right, Andrew, and everybody's really started looking at that in a different light. It's got an assessment feature that starts at the very beginning, where it goes off, does the discovery side of it, and then
let me just stop you then. So that's almost like doing the research for your wine.
Of course it is, yeah.
That's what we're looking at. So rather than just buying the first one that you see off the shelf, you're doing the research for it.
Of course it is, yeah. You wouldn't do that, right? You'd go on Google, you'd have a look, you'd go and pick things up, right? This is exactly that. If you're going to go to something, you're going to go and find a tool that knows how to do it already, right? Absolutely. That's going to do it for you as quickly as possible. So I think the shift again, over the last 12 months that I've been talking about, is people are looking for more and more tools, bits of software, stuff that they can literally just pick up and carry and run themselves. And what we've built, I suppose, with Alice is absolutely amazing on that point, right? Because it does it.
Absolutely.
It's self-service. Customers get a very, very quick view in 30 minutes.
Yep.
And the key thing...
Just on that note, sorry, carry on with that. So again, I'm linking it back to wine here. So if I had a bottle of Barolo and I had a bottle of Cabernet Sauvignon, I mix them, pour them all into a bottle or a Jeroboam or a Magnum, and mix them. Surely introducing another tool into our environment isn't going to help because it's another tool that I've got to manage.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that is a concern for people. What people have done in the past is as you said, right? It's one tool for managing one thing, and then another tool for managing another thing. Nobody's really thought about, what are the important things out there at the moment, right? What do we need to be looking at? Patching is one of them.
Yeah.
Getting your estate under control is another thing. And the automation is what we've tried to build and bring together is exactly that, right? There's two key things, applications being one of them and device updates being the other, which is what people really need to keep up to date and try and bring as much automation as possible. So you'll probably find that, there's going to be certain bits of software out there you probably don't need anymore. And back to the point around adding another tool though, the second you start doing the rationalization side of it, right, looking for you've now picked up probably 3, 4, 5 different products that are doing the same thing. That could be on different licensing models. You've got the option to consolidate. So you're going to start saving money there on license costs and things like that. So, eventually it pays for itself.
Yeah.
But as I said, the key thing really around all this stuff is making sure you don't carry that forward into the same project, right? Now, I've done this kind of stuff for years, as you know. I've done from a technical perspective. I've gone there. I've actually physically done migrations for people in the past. And it's always, I was always a strong believer in, if there's something you don't need, you need to remove it from there. But there's so many other people out there that have done things, organizations that have done things, internal constraints people have had that have gone, look, we just need to get from A to B. We're just going to take everything with us. So, you're talking 10, 15, 20 years worth of stuff that's collated there that you don't want to take into new environments. You need to keep these kind of things clean. And make them so efficient that they look after themselves effectively. And that's the point we want to get to with everyone, really, I think, right?
Yeah.
That's the point where everyone needs to get to. It's not just us. I think as a business, that's fine. We're pushing that methodology. But I think, if it's an education piece for everyone, I think everybody really needs to be thinking in that manner now. It's like, how do we make things a little bit easier for ourselves going forward?
So I guess if you say you're a multimillionaire entrepreneur, tech entrepreneur living in California, or Boston, wherever it might be.
I'll be buying more expensive bottles of wine.
Well, just bear with me on this then. But, I've got a cellar full of 2,000 bottles of wine. What is the biggest question that we ask customers that they never know the answer to. And that is, how many applications have you got?
Absolutely.
So obviously, everyone thinks they know, but I've never been or never seen a CIO or CTO with 100% confidence put their mortgage with a plus or minus 10% delta of how many applications they've got in their estate. Yeah. So I think, you know, asset management's been around for years, right? People will look after the licensing and the consumption side of it, but no one's actually looked at the actual application estate per se, because it's easy to introduce SaaS products now. So people are going through browsers and paying on the company credit card for a CRM tool in marketing that's not controlled by technology.
Yeah, I agree.
We've got the advent of shadow IT. 67% of technology is now run by the business rather than technology because it's all unapproved. So I think part of what the Alice story is and part of the Camwood story, I think to a degree, is trying to simplify the complex, because the things have become very complicated, have been built up from legacy systems to new systems to different ways of working. But it feels like it's creaking at the seams at the moment.
Yeah, I think it is. I think you're right. I mean, take some examples from yourself, actually. I mean, what kind of things are you seeing? Like, obviously, from, you know, we talk to C-suite all the time, right? We get people coming to us. We talk to other MSPs. We talk to SIs, right? I mean, there's a lot of commonality. What's the main thing you're always hearing, and the mistakes, I guess, people are always talking about, right? I mean, what's the one correction we always need to tell people? Majority of the time, these guys are doing things. You know, they're trying to start something before they've even got running, right? You know, let's get the technology up, let's get the infrastructure up. I think it's the biggest problem we've got. You know, there's got to be something that, you know, you can do up front, and what we're trying to get to is give people the information that they can actually deploy these things as quickly as possible. And often, you know, these personas, when you started mapping things like applications to devices, is where you start unlocking the 70%, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And then you've got the 30% which is messing around with. And it's difficult sometimes when you try and explain that to people.
Yeah,
and they don't quite get it, right?
Well, I think to your question, I think that was in that bit there was around kind of what have I seen in the last 12 months that may be different to what you've just talked about.
Yeah.
And I think there's probably two things. Because of macroeconomic geopolitical climates, decisions are taking a lot longer.
Yep.
So ratification and justification of any investment is being scrutinized more significantly than I've known it in my career.
Yeah, I think so. But I mean, the other thing is I guess people just think it's too expensive, right? You know, automatically when you start talking about these things to people, it's like, oh my God, that's going to be expensive.
Yeah.
But in reality, it's not, right?
Well, I think the difference is, and I think this will happen over the next 2 or 3 years, is we always used to talk about return on investment.
Yeah.
Now, those business cases took forever to write, forever to justify. There's always flaws in them, in my personal opinion, because it's using almost fictitious, but certainly non-factual data to build the business case, right?
Yeah.
And so I think part of where we're going with kind of the length of time it takes for customers to buy things now, is because they haven't got the data up front to make the business case that says, actually, I know this will pay for itself within 2 months or within 3 months. But actually what we're trying to do is flip that completely on its head. So rather than justifying what we think or know the outcome will be in 2 or 3 months' time, that customer gets that there and then. And that's hugely important, I think, for building trust with the customers, because we can say, for example, we've identified 1,000 applications, but you only need 200 to move forward with it. So actually it takes legacy debt out. To your point, you don't migrate what you don't need. And I think this phrase time to value is something that customers will start to hear more about, where you start using real data sets and data points to build that business case.
Yeah, no, that's true. And I guess the other point to that, right, is so that's the very beginning of the process, right? You know, we've spoken quite a lot about it now, but you know, there's a lengthy bit in this where people are now getting a lot of traction and understanding. You know, you need to keep those up to date. You know, you're not going to be able to do everything, right? You're not going to be able to automate everything. You know, anybody saying that it is, I mean, there's no silver bullet, as you know.
Absolutely.
But actually, you can automate a lot. And in that, education has to happen. People need to start understanding that, you know what, there's probably 40, 45, 50% of your application estate that you can set to basically automatically update, package itself, when new version's available, get it back out there, push it out, and it's done. You don't need to worry about it, right? But then there's always going to be those sort of slightly more difficult because of some fine tuning that you need to do. What do you need to do about those, right?
Yeah.
You either trust somebody internally, or you go external and go, look, guys, you guys are really good at this. What service do you offer on top of it? And I think that model is going to start happening a bit more, right? Where if people aren't just buying tools, I think people are going to want tools, but somebody to maybe even run it for them with a little bit of intelligence on top of the intelligence that it's already getting.
Yep.
And I think that's the model I think that's going to start getting adopted going forward, right? But the key question is, right, we're going to get to a point probably in the next 2 to 3 years where everybody's adopted that, I think, personally.
Yep.
Everybody's going to be working in that manner. It's going to be great. You know, we're going to move away from people being vulnerable on a regular basis, and everyone's going to have the latest version of applications and OS updates and things like that. What's the next evolution, though, of ALM? You know, what comes next is the really interesting part. And I think, you know, that keeps my head whirring all the time. It's like, well, actually, once this is in this state, what is going to be the next thing that goes wrong? I mean, what's your thoughts on that?
Well, I've used an analogy for 30 odd years working in technology, and what goes around comes around. So if you think of cloud delivery model, if you cloud of containerization, if you talk around application security and vulnerability management, think about all those things.
Yeah.
The most secure way of doing all of that was a green screen terminal going into a mainframe. That is the cloud delivery model 40, 50 years ago.
Yeah.
And it's still the most secure now because you couldn't get into those containerized applications that sit in a mainframe. It was nigh on impossible. Now, granted, they weren't as connected externally.
Yeah.
So there's less vulnerability to it, but everything just comes around. So I think we'll just see, I think we might see, being slightly controversial, more people coming into private clouds, into data centers, because there's, you know, if you can't control the costs of what you're using in the cloud, then how can you budget for it in effect? So I think that'd be quite a significant thing that we'll see. But I also think that there will be a next evolution, because if you look at, like we said earlier, all the SaaS products, there's no ALM around the SaaS products yet.
Yeah.
And that probably brings us nicely to talk around a little bit around artificial intelligence and control and governance for AI in both large enterprises, but also in the SMB market space. Because you know, we've seen instances where the first fines have been issued for AI being used to publish audited accounts abroad. And the consulting firm having a record fine because it wasn't factually correct or trained on different data. So I think AI has got some real opportunities. So that was me, folks, just putting a cork in application lifecycle management.
Very good.
But I think what's your views on AI and governance? We're obviously heavy users internally.
I think before we even move on to that, I think it's probably time for another sip and a bit more inspiration, I reckon, to be honest with you.
It is a garnet red colour, is the official colouring of the rock.
Is that what we're calling it?
It is.
Garnet. Bit like Alf.
I'm sure it's all over West Ham support. So I think as long as AI doesn't start drinking the best wine.
So that's one thing we're safe from AI. I think it's never going to die. It's never going to take our drinks away. Which is, you know, we're talking about humanoids and things like that are going to be like, I'd terminate it really.
Right, absolutely.
I think we're quite safe there for a little while anyway. But I think, you know, it's a really big topic at the moment. I think, you know, everyone's driving towards that. We spoke about it at the beginning, right? It's been a massive shift. I mean, you're talking 600, 700, 800% it's grown by, probably even more over the last 6 months. And everybody I talk to is testing some form of AI, right? They're going, we're doing this, we're doing that. You know, we've got this chatbot that we've basically created, or we're using ChatGPT or Claude or something to do whatever. And now with obviously Google, right, you know, they've put agents in people's phones, basically, right, where you could just go off and create your own agents and stuff like that. People are going to start using this more and more, right? You know, it's not like anybody started blocking it yet.
Yeah.
I don't think there's many organizations out there that have actively gone, do you know what, we're going to stop from a firewall perspective, anybody going onto these sort of AI sites. So that you go to the URL, we're going to block it. What are they going to do about people's phones, right? They can put as many policies as they want in there. Most people nowadays, BYOD devices, they'll have the AI that's sitting on their phone. And whether they know or not, they may end up creating an agent that goes, oh yeah, you know what, I'm going to read my emails. And after I've read my emails, set up a call for me, do whatever they might want to do and just experiment. But then what they're not realizing is they expose themselves.
Yeah, exactly. Right? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And I think that is probably the next big industry, I think.
Yeah, I think so, yeah. But isn't that very much like, say, probably 15 years ago, maybe even longer? And it's still very true today that the biggest cyber risk to a business are its internal people.
Yep.
Because of lack of education.
Of course, yeah.
And yet we've built this massive cyber industry that was one of the fastest growing in tech history until AI became this bigger thing.
Yeah.
So does that mean for the next 10, 15 years, we're going to be talking governance, education, data management?
I think we will be talking about it for the next 15 years, but I think certainly over the next 3 to 6 months, it's going to be a really hot topic. I think more and more people are going to be looking at how they're going to manage this governance, how they're going to be looking to how they're going to discover what people are using, right? Microsoft, I think, are going to end up cornering the market. I think with their Agent 365 stuff that they're going out and the control plane that they're building on top of it, I think it's brilliant. It's very smart. Effectively, they're going to go out.
So no, we're not sponsored by anybody yet, but we'd love you to come sponsor us. Thank you.
I think they've done a great job in that. I think there's other people catching up now as well. Just so you know, I think people are suddenly realizing the back end of last year, and I'm seeing loads of products coming out now which are looking to manage it, and not just from their own perspective. This is like a full-on sort of, you call it an orchestration engine, right?
Yeah.
Where it's going to identify what you've got out there, then go and look at sort of what's going on with it.
So obviously in the world of wine, we've primarily got red, white, rosé. I'm going to get sparkling, just because I'm a bit of a heathen like that.
Yeah.
So in effect, we're saying that there's going to be lots of different agentic AI type agent/models coming out that have a slightly different flavor to each other, but all try and do the same thing in different markets. Is that what we're thinking?
I think they probably will be. Yeah. I mean, we're obviously already seeing stuff coming out at the moment, right? I think the difference is people are going to be building them themselves.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Whereas
we're putting the power into the hand of the user.
Absolutely. And that's where I sort of it's dangerous, right? Because the idea might be brilliant. Yeah. All they're doing is trying to save themselves some time. They're trying to make things a little bit slicker, so they've got more opportunity to do higher value to that and things like that. But I think it's going to start getting more and more responsibility. And I don't know if it's going to sit under CISO, right? I don't think it's going to sit under security. I think it's going to be something else. You're going to have to create a whole new industry just for this, I think.
I'll probably go with Aladdin, a whole new world then, by the way.
No, what a great song, eh? But no, we're not talking about songs.
No, sorry.
We're
we're not getting songs.
Yeah. That's a whole new podcast.
Yeah, absolutely.
But no, I think, it's going to be, I think there's going to be, something's going to get coined where it's going to be, whatever it may be. I don't know. I can't even think of anything at the moment.
Chief
but
Artificial Intelligence Officer?
Possibly. Who knows? But there's going to end up being...
Or here's an interesting concept then, because if you think traditionally, not in all organizations, but traditionally a lot of IT directors are sat under this finance director.
Yep.
Which is very much a cost control
Correct.
technology business in effect.
Yeah.
Now technology has the ability to differentiate,
Yep.
give competitive advantage, drive efficiency, improve time to market.
Yep.
So should we not be putting, if the tooling is in the hands of the users now, which are going to be dangerous without education,
Yeah.
absolutely, should there not be business lines that have their own AI responsibility? Or is the most value when business lines sit and they share and aggregate their data, and they have a bigger AI that sits at a corporate level above? So in effect, where I'm going to here is you've either got 12 bottles of wine, which is a large language model, or you've got one bottle of wine, which is a small language model. Where do you see the future being in that?
So I think for good quality AI use, you're probably better off with the small language models. But that takes you into a completely different point, right? We're talking about small language models, large language models, right? And you're absolutely right. People are already siloed off with their data. That's a massive problem for AI. In my eyes, I think
it's the biggest problem.
You can't be having everybody having different bits of data that are then, because this is what happens, right? It's like having multiple systems and people are pulling whatever they want out of it. And then all of a sudden they try to put it into one report. Yeah. They're like, well, that doesn't make sense. I've got this and you've got that. It's going to be exactly the same with people trying to just train AI on their own data. I think there needs to be, as part of all the governance and all the stuff that's going to be, anything that's going to be introduced to processes wise, there needs to be that data layer as well, which is actually unified. I think there needs to be some quality controls around that. There needs to be a way of managing that. There needs to be, some sort of assessment that looks at that kind of stuff, right? You need to go out there and go, listen, guys, this is what we need to look at. What have you already got out there? Where's that stuff sitting? Let's bring it together. Let's unify that data. And now let's start asking it the right type of questions, right? You put it in the right buckets, but you have it in one place.
Yeah.
And then when it does need to reference other stuff, that's fine, right? You can create whatever model you want and then train it specifically on that bit of data. But then it still has access, but it won't. It's not going to get muddied by what it doesn't know, right? So
at what point then? So if you think of I'm not talking about any specific.
I'm going to take another sip.
AI agent or a chat GPT or a Grok or whatever. I'm not talking about anything specific, right?
Yep.
But the entry point from a cost point of view is relatively low at this moment in time for enterprise, I would say. But let me just finish.
Yeah.
I think one of the biggest things that we'll see in the next 18 to 24 months is when the large investors in digital infrastructure, be it storage, be it edge compute, be it whatever it might be, how are they going to recoup that? And I think we'll go from, let's just say, something like £30 to something like £80 to £100 a user a month. Because they've got to recoup it somehow.
So back to the cost point, right, which I was going to just go over, right? So actually, the reason why so many people are using it and so many people have got access to it and they're doing it under the radar is because £20 on a corporate credit card, no one's even going to look at that.
Right?
£20 a month, no one's even going to care. But to your point,
I'd just say no, I would do.
Well, you would, yeah, you would, as would I. But there's a lot of
value,
large organisations, right? Absolutely. But back to that point around, well, when it goes from like that £20 to £80 a month, that's when all of a sudden people are going to turn it off.
Yeah, absolutely.
But nobody's then looked at what has that person been doing with it, and then all of a sudden they become unproductive again, and then I can't do the other work that they're doing, but they're expected to do that work. This is why everybody needs to get ahead of it. I think.
Yeah.
You really need to be like trying to aid people in why they're using it, first of all, right? And it could be that, you've accepted it, but you haven't quite realized that how many different applications or different versions or different products people are using. So trying to get that information and then talking to the users and going, well, actually, what is it you're using for? What have you built in it? Then consolidate, then, get it under one license, get it under a perpetual license or whatever it might be, or an enterprise license that they're offering at that time, or have a look at what you already got access to. You might be a Google house, you might be a Microsoft house. Yep. What are they already offering? Could you then migrate some of that stuff over to that and have it within your license, so you're saving money there as well? But I think the key bit's going to be, as I say, over the next 3 to 6 months, and anybody who's interested in it needs to get onto it, because I think you need to be looking at how you can help people use AI better.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I mean, I'll get a bit of a glow from the red wine and from your positive responses to artificial intelligence. So thank you very much for that.
Yeah.
I guess one of the other topics that we really want to, we'll put a cork in AI for now. It will be pervasive throughout everything, I think.
I think there's probably going to be a new AI chat every single time we talk.
Yes.
There's going to be something new that's been released.
Then let me ask you this then. Before we cork on AI. Very good. Very good. Before we cork AI then, what's the best application of AI you've come across so far?
The best application of AI?
Or have we not yet seen it?
Well, actually, I funny enough, I probably preempted you there a little bit, didn't I? So actually, some of the things that I've seen come out of Nano Banana are absolutely phenomenal.
Oh, yeah.
I think the video creation, the image creation, all of that type of stuff, any sort of AI product that's out there that's aiding that, I think is phenomenal. And just purely because I'm thinking more around, and I've got a big thing about, as you know, about education in this country and how I don't like it and all the rest of it, right? Because it's pointless stuff and people don't learn, unless you want to be a doctor or a surgeon. I think, we're taking everybody around the wrong route, and especially now. So stuff like that is only inspiring people that are younger at the moment to go, do you know what? I can use these tools to create feature-length movies or small little episodes of something and things like that, right? So from that perspective, it's brilliant. I mean, there are other examples of that. Kids out there that, my kids know, and my kids themselves sometimes are using AI tools to create images that they print on T-shirts, and then they're going to sell those T-shirts. It's those kind of things are helping the next future of entrepreneurs, I think, and actually they're helping them think right now about, well, actually, this is how I can actually use AI to then build a career later on, right? Not it's going to get rid of me because it's going to do it. You're going to use, because you still have to have the ideas, right? It's not going to think of an idea for you.
Surely you could go to a movie and say, give me the best business idea ever.
Of course it will, but I'm talking movie specific, right?
Right. Okay.
It's not going to tell you, oh yeah, by the way, it's not going to come up with a movie by itself. You have to prompt it.
Why not?
I don't think we'll get to that stage yet. I think Terminator's
AI challenging AI for underwriting insurers, though.
Well, yeah, this is true. This is true. I mean, AI is also targeting vulnerabilities by itself.
Well, it absolutely is. Absolutely is.
There's a lot there. But I think, as I say, the single thing that I've seen at the moment, which is brilliant, And I think, there is enterprise sort of
of course.
instances that
Yeah.
you could use things for. But I think from that perspective, and just for the future of AI, the future of, all the children growing up at the moment, I think stuff like that is fantastic, because it gives them that sort of knowledge and that assurance that actually AI is not going to take my job away from me. I can use AI to create a better job for myself. So I think that for me is personally. What about yourself, Abby? You keep asking me all the questions.
That's because you're not asking me anybody questions.
You keep talking all the time. That's why.
I think you see some really, really positive and strong use cases in healthcare.
Yep.
Not specifically around kind of replacing job roles with AI, but early diagnosis based on patterns and the great use of data, which means that consultants that may typically spend 80% of their time looking at diagnosis can now spend 20% of their time on diagnosis because AI is doing the 80%. So that over a long period of time should reduce wait times for various critical diseases. So I think that kind of application is societal and really changing and powerful. And that's a positive use of AI, because that's not about job replacement, it's about healthcare.
Yeah, of course.
So I think that's a really important thing. And I don't think we've yet seen the best use cases for AI. I think the pace at which it's evolved, no one's really kept up with for the last 12 months, 18 months probably. So I think people have taken a step back a little bit with AI now, because I think we've seen so many failed attempts to implement AI. Because, I know, for example, there's one global US bank that all of their employees had to go on a prompt engineering course. So to get the best use of AI, you've got to know how to prompt and how to ask. So I think there's all these things that are coming out and emerging. But I think I personally, again, AI is not going to go away, but I think we're at the top of the hype cycle now. And I think the bubble might explode for 12 or 18 months, purely because people haven't defined a use case for which AI for their business would be really impactful and really changing for that business. So the first thing you've got to do is say, what is AI going to resolve for me? What's the use case for it? What if I didn't have the legacy, this is my business of a mission statement, how would I achieve that, and how can AI contribute to that?
Yeah. Okay, so before we actually do put a cork in the AI,
yes,
do you think Skynet's going to happen?
Yes.
Excellent.
I think we don't know what we don't know at the moment.
Yeah, I agree.
I
agree. I think I think we're doing all we can to put controls and things like that. But that's a conversation for when this is completely finished, I think.
I do believe that's one for when it's finished.
Excellent. So, where do we move on to next?
Well, I don't know. I mean, we could do emerging trends, because Barolo is a red wine classic, right? It's been around for years and years.
It has. It's changed ever so subtly over the years as well, right? I think this is the thing that you need to bring out with this wine, right? Although it's got a status of the king of wines, I think little changes have happened over the years. Often it's actually sometimes got a number of different grapes in this. Actually, not every single one that you get, but there is certain ones out there that you can get. They're made of different grapes. So yeah, it's got a lot of complexity to it. So
a bit like you.
Well, I'm a very complex guy, right? As we know. But yeah, no, I think trends at the moment, like AI trends, I think we covered a lot of it in the last one. I think what we just spoke about.
What about then? We are a 95% services business.
Yeah.
And that has its benefits and its challenges, obviously. Customers and MSPs or VARs or GSIs really seem to love an ISV at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Why is that?
Well, I think it's just ease. Right. I think people are trying to find something that they can just put in, and it just works. I think is what
we're talking Ronseal.
Effectively, yeah. It does what it says on the tin is what people are looking for. And I think at the speed now that things are getting built at, vibe coding, we're back onto AI, but vibe coding has been, I think, a massive thing for MVPs, right? You can create something really, really quickly, see whether it's going to work, and then crack on with it, right? So a lot of good applications have been built recently. People have been doing stuff and things like that. So, but I think a lot of the, as you say, the SIs and things like that, I think they want to try and increase sort of profitability, right? So they're looking at, well, what tools can we get at that are out there that are going to potentially offset some of that, and maybe we use the people that we've got to do higher value stuff.
Yeah.
And I think that's the way things are going.
Yeah.
It's almost, as I say, almost think about it as AI.
About so where we started when we talked about kind of conversations we're having with CIOs, and we talked around trying to simplify the complex.
Yep.
Isn't this just like probably 20 years ago, almost a rip and replace of, well, we'll buy that for managing ports on the firewall, we'll buy the antivirus for managing the databases and the OS, we'll buy this for doing that, we'll buy, and before you know, you've got 15 products that are all specifically doing one thing but not talking to each other.
Yeah.
So we're not talking about actually taking the legacy out because it's not really worked and putting in the new.
No, well, I don't think people are. That's the problem, right? That's part of the other problem as well that you mentioned. It's getting into that cycle, but it's a process, right? People don't, you've got to educate people to get to that point as well. And I think at the moment, you're right. People are just potentially tool on top of tool on top of tool. And we will go back to how it was 10, 15 years ago where people were just buying everything separately and then going, everyone manage it.
Here's a different question then. And one that I know we talked about passionately together before.
Yeah.
Are a lot of these new tools being seen as project tools just to identify the problem as opposed to BAU tools?
So I think there's probably things out there that actually people are just using as a one-off.
Yeah.
Right? They're just getting it, putting it in there, going, great, I've done what I need to do now. And then don't really see the value in what it could provide.
Yeah.
So it is difficult sometimes because people always think they can still do it better manually.
Yeah. So ignore the manual bit then. So talking on the track of ISVs, is the ISV model, do you think, that the customer should be able to do it themselves? Because actually, if the customer doesn't have the requisite skills, people, knowledge to get the best value from the tool, then it's almost going to be a waste of time deploying the tooling. Is there still a service model, do you think,
so
in that space?
Yeah, I think a lot of ISVs will fall over because they don't have a service that they can provide on top of it.
Yeah.
And it is exactly what you just said, right? It's the expertise. You've got to then go, I've got to learn another product. And sometimes these products are not as easy and intuitive to use as they should be.
Yeah.
So you can only go back to the supplier, and they often have got one person who's basically working there. They've got a developer or something like that.
Yeah.
And these guys aren't there to be able to, and they don't have the capacity to do it, right? But if you really need to be getting people out there, and I know people are doing it, right? They're training they're training SIs and things like that to go, right, you're selling our product, you need to learn. But if you were to almost be an ISV and then sell a service on top of it and just go, do you know what? You've got the model anyway for the actual, the software, you've purchased it, it's great. For a little bit extra on top of it, we'll just manage the whole lot for you. So it does everything that it needs to do. We'll make sure it's doing it. Anything it can't handle, we'll manage for you, right? So I think a little bit of that needs to be thought about. And I don't know whether that's people doing it in an ecosystem, people going to talk to other people to do it, or they get their own side of it. So maybe some ISVs start doing services, or they find people like Camwood, I suppose, to help you out, right?
Yeah.
So
on a very similar note then.
Yeah.
Sorry, I feel a bit like...
It's all right. You're giving me question time here. This is not what I'm meant to be. That's why I keep sipping and you're not.
So I think one of I will bring it back to the question that you asked me towards the beginning, which I didn't really answer because I went off on a bit of a tangent, is the red wine, the Barolo red wine, which is very nice, by the way, started flowing.
Yeah.
I was recently on a panel of experts talking about 2025 as a year as in business and 2026 predictions. So yada, yada, yada. One of the things that I pointed out that people were not startled at, I know we do this anyway, but it's just kind of educationally, is this whole concept of co-opetition. So I think it's a Microsoft coined phrase for cooperation with competition, but like data, you want to merge them together and get to work. I don't think it quite works as a word, by the way, but the principle
it's a bit of a mouthful.
It is a bit of a mouthful, a bit like the Barolo actually, because it's so full of money. But where you've got competition in the MSP space, right? You've got MSPs, generic MSPs, right? And I think there's more than 100,000 in the UK. But then you've got people that may specialize like Camwood in applications. You've got people that will partner and deliver and focus on network and SD-WAN. You've got people that will do infra and data center. So all those service lines. Some do all of it, the bigger ones, obviously. So do you think there's value in building conversations and relationships with non-competing MSPs where you could get access to their customers. Because let's face it, the holy grail of business and the most difficult thing in business is finding a brand new customer.
So before I answer that, you've just basically turned a question that you were answering into a question for me, just saying that.
Okay, delightful.
But well done.
What can I just say? If I've educated you on something, that I'm very pleased tonight.
Well done, though. Well done. Yeah, look, I think there is...
Just while you talk, I'm going to have this because I've been talking.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I think there is opportunity out there. I think that, let's be selfish and take our examples that we have. We've got some free services that we provide that absolutely anybody could just take.
Sure.
Self-service, crack on with it, and all it's going to do for you is make you look good in front of your own customers, give them the lay of the land around potentially issues that they may have, and then for yourselves, it's then going, well, we could look at some additional professional services work and things like that to help help the customer.
Do you think some of the MSP community are mature enough to think in that way? Because if you're quite a niche, either vertical capability or vertical industry, you might not be interested in, for example, looking at application rationalization if we do SD-WAN connectivity for manufacturing.
Yeah.
But the value of putting those things together is you've got the trust of the customer and the voice of the customer. You've done your due diligence on that new partner potentially.
Yeah.
It's a lot cheaper to acquire a customer by signing a new partner and going into one of their customers than it is to acquire a new customer, which sometimes takes 18 months.
Yeah, I agree. I think there is that. And I think it's more about, I don't think it's whether they've got the knowledge. I think it's more around whether they're willing to take a little risk, right? Do you want to do something that's going to benefit your customer, which potentially will help them in the long run, rather than
stick with that customer, right?
Absolutely.
Rather than introducing competition.
Absolutely.
Introduce a friend.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah.
I agree with that. That's a really good way of putting it. Introducing a friend is...
Every now and then something pops up there,
That's a really...
Usually it's after a glass of red wine. But
Yeah. Well, I'm good job of recording this, right?
Exactly.
But no, I think there's a lot of interesting conversations we can have out there. And I don't think necessarily, the intercomparability thing that you were talking about or whatever it is, right? Competition is what you were talking about. You don't need to see everybody as competition, right? Everyone's trying to drive for the same thing, and ultimately everyone's trying to make sure that the customers are getting the best that they can. Yes, you might be doing it slightly differently, or you might be doing it a slightly different way as well. But I think we should all be thinking about, well, how do we get people standardizing things? How do we get people going in the same direction? We want all the cars going in the same direction. We don't want a car coming at us because we don't want to crash.
Yes, yeah, totally.
So I think there's work that can be done around that. I think there's a lot of events that go on that I think help that. And I'd encourage people to continue going to those kind of things, because you do meet competitors there, but you start talking about things and you then suddenly realize that actually you guys are almost on the same page with these kind of things, right?
Yeah.
And if your product's doesn't do everything that it needs, that my customer would want, that's fine. But you've got 10% of your product does what I need it to do, right?
Yeah.
I'll bring you into that customer. We can use that 10% of it and then we'll carry on with something else.
Yeah.
So I think that type of mentality also needs to be sort of, normalized, I think, within the industry as well. Yeah. Help other people out, I think, is where the key is. If your product does something really well, see how you can work together to bring that bit out.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then, it only strengthens your own product.
Yeah, no.
So I think there's a lot of conversations over this next year that can happen like that, and people can help each other out.
Okay. Do you want to top us up a little bit there?
Yeah, of course.
I was just thinking, as the first and the inaugural podcast for Vintech, that as the wine was oak smoked barreled for 18 months, it has a slight tobacco smell to it,
yes,
and taste to it, which is really beautiful and earthy.
Yep.
But what's the one thing that you've smoked in the last 12 months? And because it's not a leading question, I'm not talking about anything illegal or any narcotics.
Okay.
But in the world of business, smoke meaning you've absolutely smashed it out of the park.
What have we absolutely smashed out of the park? Me specifically? Or as a business?
You're very selfish, so I would imagine that you would talk about
Well, that's always going to be about us, right? But I think, look.
Thank you, brother.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the last 12 months have been a roller coaster, I think. I think there's been for us specifically. I think there's been an amalgamation of things that we've been doing for a very, very long time.
Yeah.
And I say this to people, and I say this to customers, and I say it to, I say it to you on a regular basis, right? It's always been a case of telling people they've got a problem and showing people they've got a problem in the same conversation instantly is the game changer.
Yeah, agreed.
And I think what we've done with Alice and the assessments we've been doing for a number of years, by giving that to somebody or putting that data in front of them in 30 to 40 minutes, I think has been an absolute game changer.
Just out of interest, was the roller coaster the corkscrew?
It was the corkscrew.
Right, okay. See what I did there?
Very good, very good. Oh, we're going to have to continue to use that one because it's a bit like a roller coaster.
I was going to bring my posh one over next time.
Well, maybe you could bring that one next time. We'll try that one out.
That's more almost like manual versus automation when you see how simple it is, trust me.
Yeah. Is it that good?
It is that good.
Well, maybe we can talk about manual automation next time. We'll bring that cork.
Then. Yeah, I think so.
No, but we won't be talking about the wheel wine, though. We'll be talking about the corkscrews.
Well, the corkscrew is part of the experience, right? Because that's like your initial conversation with a new prospect.
It's a bit like the control plane.
It is like the control plane. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Excellent. So, guys, thank you very much for joining us. That has been an experience for our first Vintech episode. I think the wine has been absolutely amazing. The questions have been great as well. Not quite what I was expecting, I think, from our first one, but we will learn. I think either way, this was a great debate. We had some really, really interesting conversations around things.
I think certainly some interesting topics and debates and experiences shared over a really, really fantastic bottle of Barolo, which I think has to remain a place in our heart because it was the first Vintech and the first bottle. So I think we'll hang on to that forever.
I think so. I think we will probably purchase another one of these bottles, and when we hit our milestone potentially of episodes, we'll go back to that bottle.
Yep. So listen, thank you everyone for listening in to us. We've had a blast doing it.
We have indeed.
We do hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget as well, if you want to, you can send Sanjay or I questions that you'd like us to consider for debate in the next episode of Vintech.
Yep.
Also, any wine suggestions would be gratefully received. You can see the kind of landmark that we've set in this first episode, but not bad for the first one. So thank you, Sanjay.
Cheers. Thank you very much.
See you all soon.
See you all.
Thank you.
Take care.